The night was blacker than tar when the carnival lights first flickered back to life. For years, the abandoned fairgrounds on the outskirts of Miles County had remained silent, a rotting graveyard of laughter and screams that had long since turned to echoes. But tonight, something stirred. The sound of faint carnival music slithered through the fog, its warped melody skipping and dragging like a record possessed. Deep inside the cracked walls of the funhouse, beneath flickering bulbs and streaks of mildew, Art the Clown was reborn. His body was a patchwork of scars and filth, his mouth frozen in that grotesque grin that seemed painted by madness itself. The makeup, white as bone, black as coal, cracked as he moved, flaking like dried blood. He sat before a shattered mirror, staring at the reflection that was both him and something far worse. Behind his dead eyes, faint whispers crawled. They weren't just voices, they were memories, fragments of what he once was, or what he was meant to be. A faint laugh trembled from his throat, dry, choking, and cruel. It had been years since he'd felt alive. But something had pulled him back from the void, something ancient and angry. Art, a voice hissed from the darkness behind the mirror. The reflection rippled like disturbed water. It's time. The mirror clouded, and in the fog, a face appeared, the little pale girl. Her features were waxen, her eyes lifeless pools of white. She tilted her head and smiled, revealing rows of tiny, uneven teeth. "You've been chosen again," she whispered. "To finish the story." Art tilted his head, silent. His grin widened as he dragged a finger down the fogged glass, smearing a trail that looked disturbingly like blood. Outside, the ground trembled. A thin crack split open the earth beneath the fairgrounds, releasing a breath of heat and rot. Somewhere deep below, something ancient shifted. Miles away, Sienna Shaw jolted awake in her bed, her breath sharp and trembling. Sweat soaked her sheets, and her body quivered from the remnants of a dream that felt more like a memory. She saw Gabby, her cousin, falling, her arms outstretched, her face twisted in terror, as a burning portal devoured her whole. Sienna had screamed her name, but it was too late. The fire had taken her, dragging her into a place beyond reason. Now, every night, Sienna dreamt of that moment. Every night, the portal called to her. Her once gentle eyes had hardened since the night of the massacre. She could still feel the faint warmth of the angelic armor she'd worn when she faced Art before. It hadn't vanished, not completely. Sometimes, when her emotions ran wild, her hands would glow faintly, golden veins pulsing beneath her skin. Something inside her was changing. Something powerful. And tonight, that power began to stir again. She looked in the mirror across her room, her reflection pale in the moonlight. For a brief second, she swore she saw a shadow standing behind her, a familiar outline. Of a man with a pointed hat and a smile that wasn't human. Art. She spun around, but there was nothing there, just silence. Her pulse hammered in her throat, her breathing ragged. Then, faintly, she heard it. A child's giggle. It echoed through the hallway, playful yet wrong, distant yet near. Sienna grabbed the dagger from her nightstand, the same one that had saved her life years ago, and crept toward the sound. The air grew heavy. The lights flickered. The giggle turned into a whisper. "Come find her, Sienna." She froze. That voice, Gabby's voice, drifted through the dark. The walls around her began to ripple as if they were breathing. The carpet beneath her feet turned damp and warm, and a faint red glow seeped from the cracks in the floorboards. Sienna clutched her chest, gasping, as the world twisted around her. Her reflection in a nearby mirror began to distort, eyes bleeding black, mouth stretching wide. From within that reflection, Art's pale face emerged, smiling from the other side of the glass. He raised a single finger to his lips, shushing her. Then, with a single violent movement, he pressed his hand against the inside of the mirror, and the glass cracked like a spiderweb. The sound of carnival music began again. Faint. Distant. Calling. Sienna stumbled backward, whispering through trembling lips, "He's back." The mirror pulsed once, then shattered completely, releasing a gust of cold, rancid air that reeked of death. As shards scattered across the floor, the laughter grew louder, echoing from every corner of the room. And from deep below, in the bowels of the earth, something enormous awakened. The clown had returned. And this time, hell itself followed him. The sun never truly rose that morning. Instead, a dull orange haze hung over Miles County, as if the world had forgotten how to breathe. The streets were eerily empty, the silence disturbed only by the faint hum of electricity flickering through dying streetlights. It was as though the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something unspeakable to begin. Sienna Shaw sat motionless at her kitchen table, her hands trembling around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The night's horror still clung to her, Art's face in the mirror, that voice calling her name, and the terrible, suffocating stench that had filled her room when the glass shattered. She had cleaned the shards, but the mirror refused to die. The fractured pieces still pulsed faintly, as if they were alive, breathing. Every few minutes, she swore she could see something moving beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victoria Hayes. "We need to talk. It's happening again." Sienna's stomach dropped. She hadn't spoken to Victoria in months, not since they both barely survived Art's last massacre. Victoria had always seemed broken after that night. Her mind fragile, her words often tangled between memory and madness. But if she was reaching out now, it could only mean one thing. Art was back. Victoria's apartment was dim and claustrophobic, every surface littered with photographs and drawings, hundreds of them, all depicting the same thing, Art the clown. His grinning face, his black eyes, his weapon in hand. Sometimes he stood behind her. Sometimes he was watching from afar. But in every image, he was alive. Victoria looked thinner, pale and unsteady, her eyes darting to every shadow as though something were lurking there. "You've seen him too," she said before Sienna could even speak. "He's not gone. He never was. He's waiting." Sienna sat across from her, her heart pounding. "I saw him last night. In my mirror." Victoria's lip quivered. "Then he's coming for both of us." She reached for one of the photographs, a distorted image of Art standing in a dark tunnel, surrounded by fire. "Do you know where this is?" she whispered. "I dream of this place every night. It's beneath us. Below the town. A place that feels like it shouldn't exist." "The underworld," Sienna muttered, remembering the portal that had swallowed Gabby. Victoria nodded slowly. "He's building something there. A gate. A way to bring it all through. Not just him, but everything that comes with him." Sienna's hands began to tremble. She could feel that strange pulse again, that warmth spreading beneath her skin. Her veins shimmered faintly with a golden light, alive, burning. Victoria's eyes widened. "You're changing again. I think it's because I have to go back," Sienna whispered, her voice breaking. "To wherever Gabby is. She's still there, Vic. I can feel her." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "If you go there, you won't come back the same." Sienna looked at her voice steady despite the fear gnawing inside her. "I already didn't." That night, the nightmares returned. Sienna found herself standing in the middle of the old Miles County Carnival, the same place where Art was reborn. The air was thick with smoke and rot. The carousel spun on its own, the horses' eyes missing, their mouths oozing dark liquid. The lights flickered red and white, like blood splattering across bone. From somewhere inside the funhouse, a slow, rhythmic scraping echoed, metal against flesh. Sienna moved toward it, her footsteps silent on the dirt. The smell grew stronger, iron, sweat, decay. Then she saw him. Art the clown, sitting in the center of a room filled with corpses, his masterpiece. Their faces were sewn into grotesque smiles, their eyes wide open, staring into nothing. He was carving something into the ground, a circle of symbols written in blood. At the center of the circle was the little pale girl. She stared straight at Sienna, her voice cutting through the air like a whisper of glass. "She's waiting for you, Sienna," the child murmured. "In the place where the flesh burns and the soul screams. Do you want to save her?" Sienna's heart pounded in her ears. She took a step forward, her fists clenched. "I'll find her. And I'll destroy you both if I have to." The girl smiled, cold, knowing. "You can't destroy what you already are." Suddenly, the ground cracked open beneath Sienna's feet, and fire erupted upward, swallowing the room in molten light. Art began to laugh, a wet, choking sound that echoed in every direction. His body began to melt, and yet his grin stayed perfect, untouched. As Sienna fell into the flames, she heard the child's voice again, soft, haunting, eternal. "The gates have opened, Sienna. Welcome home." The world burned red. Sienna plunged through a tunnel of fire and screams, her body weightless as she fell into the abyss. The sound of laughter, thousands of voices overlapping, echoed from every direction. It wasn't human laughter. It was something ancient, mocking, a sound that made her bones rattle and her skin crawl. Then, impact. She slammed into the ground hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. The soil was wet, warm, alive. It pulsed faintly beneath her hands, slick with blood and black slime. The air reeked of rot and sulfur, and when she looked up, her heart nearly stopped. She stood in a carnival that stretched endlessly into darkness. The tents were stitched together from human skin, the rides built from bone and rusted metal. Faces, some screaming, some smiling, were embedded into the ground, their mouths open in silent agony. Red lights flickered like dying stars overhead. And in the distance, she heard it, the same carnival tune that haunted her nightmares. Slow, broken, detuned. "Welcome to Hell's Carnival." A sign above the entrance, painted in what could only be blood, swayed in the windless air. Beneath it, the little pale girl waited, her head tilted in that unnatural way, her expression unreadable. "You made it," she whispered, voice echoing in Sienna's skull rather than her ears. "Gabby's here, somewhere deep inside. But so is he." Sienna clenched the dagger at her side. "Art." The girl's smile widened, her eyes black as oil. "He's not what you think. He never was." "What do you mean?" Sienna demanded. The girl stepped closer, her bare feet leaving no prints in the bloody soil. "You're both part of the same story. Two pieces of the same sin. You were the light he lost." Before Sienna could ask more, the child was gone, vanished into the smoke. A sudden screech echoed behind her. Sienna spun around, heart pounding, as a carousel began to move on its own. The horses were human torsos impaled on poles, their mouths sewn shut, their hands reaching outward in silent pleas. As it spun faster, the laughter returned, louder, closer, choking the air. Sienna moved forward, determined, though every step sank into the soft, fleshy ground. The deeper she walked into the carnival, the more the world around her breathed. Walls of flesh pulsated like living organs, lights flickered in rhythm with a heartbeat too slow to be hers. And then, she heard it. A faint cry. "Help, me." It was Gabby. Her cousin's voice was faint, broken, coming from the direction of the Ferris wheel, which loomed in the distance like a monument of bones and steel. The cabins were cages, and something writhed inside each one. Sienna ran toward it, her glowing veins cutting through the crimson fog. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. But when she reached the base, the air grew cold. A figure stood there. Art the Clown. His smile was painted wider than ever, his eyes glinting with joyless mirth. He was holding a balloon, black, slick, dripping with blood. In his other hand, a knife gleamed, long and jagged, its blade carved with strange symbols. Sienna froze. Every cell in her body screamed to run, but she stood her ground. "Let her go," she hissed. Art tilted his head, his grin stretching impossibly wide. Then he pointed upward. Sienna followed his gesture, and her heart shattered. Gabby hung inside one of the Ferris wheel cages, her skin pale and bruised, her eyes wide with terror. The wheel began to move, slowly, each creak echoing like a scream. Art dropped the balloon. It floated to the ground and burst. Blood sprayed outward in every direction, thick, hot, raining down in sheets. The ground beneath Sienna shuddered, splitting open as hands, human hands, emerged from the earth, clawing at her legs, pulling her down. She screamed, swinging her dagger wildly, golden light flashing in the dark. Every strike burned the hands away, leaving trails of smoke, but they kept coming, hundreds of them. Art just watched, laughing silently. Then, with a swift motion, he pressed the knife to his own chest and carved a line down the middle, splitting his painted suit open. What poured out wasn't blood, it was black light, thick and pulsing, spilling onto the ground and spreading like a disease. From that darkness, shapes began to crawl, creatures made of twisted flesh and broken bones, with faces that seemed half human, half mimicry. Sienna stared in horror. "What are they?" Art didn't answer. He simply gestured toward her, as if inviting her to join the dance. Sienna raised her dagger, her eyes glowing now, the golden light burning bright. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Art's grin widened. He lunged. The force of his movement shattered the ground around them, and the Ferris wheel behind him burst into flames. Gabby's screams echoed as the world turned red once more. And in that moment, as Art's blade met Sienna's glowing dagger, sparks of gold and black filled the air, like two gods clashing at the edge of hell. Their war had only just begun. Sienna awoke lying in a pool of blood. The air was thick, damp, and suffocating, every breath she took tasted like iron. Her ears rang from the explosion of the Ferris wheel, but beneath that ringing, she heard it again, faint, echoing carnival music, slowing, breaking apart, twisting into something darker. When she pushed herself up, her hand sank into the floor. It wasn't ground anymore, it was flesh. The walls pulsed with veins like black worms, oozing thick fluid that dripped into the pools around her. She realized she was no longer in the carnival. She was beneath it. Before her rose an enormous structure, built from twisted bone and torn muscle, resembling a cathedral sculpted by madness itself. Its ceiling disappeared into an abyss of shadows. Hanging from above were bodies, hundreds, swaying gently, their eyes stitched open in eternal terror. A massive door loomed ahead, formed entirely from rib cages fused together. And carved into it, written in blood, was a message. "The blood shall rise, and the light shall drown." Sienna's pulse pounded in her throat. The dagger in her hand flickered with faint golden fire. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but Gabby's voice still echoed in her mind, faint and desperate. "Please, don't leave me." Sienna forced herself to move forward. The ribs of the door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the cathedral stretched endlessly. The floor was wet with blood, the pews were made from bodies, twisted into shapes of worship. At the far end of the hall stood an altar, massive and black, pulsating like a living heart. Above it hung the little pale girl, suspended by invisible threads. Her eyes glowed faintly, her mouth curling into a sickening smile. "You shouldn't have come here, Sienna," she whispered. Her voice echoed through the chamber, every word vibrating the air. "You bring light into a place that has forgotten what light is. You're a mistake in his design." Sienna's eyes narrowed. "Where's Gabby?" The girl pointed to the altar. "She's part of it now. The gate needs a soul to open. Her pain feeds it." Sienna's chest tightened. She took a step closer, and then she saw her. Gabby was chained to the altar, her skin pale, her eyes half open. Strange runes were carved into her arms and chest, glowing faintly with red light. She was still breathing, but barely. Sienna ran forward, but before she could reach her, the ground split open. From the chasm below, a hand, massive, gray, and covered in symbols, burst upward, slamming against the floor. Then another. Then a face. It was Art. But not as he was before. His body twisted unnaturally, limbs lengthened, his grin impossibly wide. His skin cracked like porcelain, revealing black veins pulsing beneath. His eyes were gone, only dark holes remained, leaking tar-like tears. He had become something beyond human. The little pale girl descended slowly, standing beside him, her head resting against his shoulder like a child beside a father. He's becoming what he was always meant to be, she said softly. A vessel. A god of laughter and blood. Art stepped forward. The ground bled beneath his feet. His grin never faltered as he reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a mask. It was Sienna's. Her old costume mask from the night she first fought him. It was cracked, burned, but still recognizable. He placed it over his face, mocking her. Sienna screamed and lunged forward, her dagger blazing with golden light. Art blocked her strike effortlessly, his hand snapping around her wrist. His touch burned, cold and electric, like death itself. She fought, kicking, slashing, her veins glowing brighter with every strike. Sparks of gold and black filled the air. Each impact sent waves of energy through the room, shattering walls, breaking chains. Gabby stirred, gasping as the runes on her body flickered. Art suddenly drove his hand into Sienna's side, piercing her flesh like paper. Pain exploded through her body. She fell to her knees, blood dripping from her mouth. The pale girl tilted her head, smiling. You can't kill him, Sienna. You and he are bound. You share the same creation. Sienna coughed, clutching her wound. Then I'll end us both. She drove the dagger into her chest. The cathedral trembled violently. The blood-soaked walls screamed as light erupted from her body, pure, blinding gold. Art staggered back, smoke rising from his skin, his laughter warping into a roar of agony. The pale girl's eyes widened as cracks spread across her porcelain skin. No, this isn't how it's meant to end. Sienna screamed, her voice echoing like thunder. The light consumed everything, Art, the altar, the cathedral, the pale girl. The world burned white. And then, silence. When the light faded, Sienna was gone. Only the sound of faint laughter remained, distant and eternal. Somewhere deep below, beneath the ruins of the Blood Cathedral, a single red balloon floated upward, and popped. The silence after the explosion of light was unbearable. It was not peace, it was the stillness that comes before something terrible breathes again. Sienna opened her eyes to a sky that was neither day nor night. Everything around her shimmered in hues of gray and scarlet. She was lying in what looked like a barren desert made of ash, the air thick with the smell of burnt flesh. The ground was littered with fragments of bone, some still twitching faintly as if they refused to die. Her wound was gone. Her blood had dried into golden dust along her side. But the dagger, once her weapon, was now cracked down the middle, its light faint, flickering. She sat up slowly, her mind spinning. The last thing she remembered was plunging it into her chest, ready to end everything, to destroy Art, the pale girl, and herself if that's what it took. But somehow, she was still here. A voice drifted through the heavy air. Soft. Childlike. You can't kill what was never born. Sienna turned. The little pale girl stood a few feet away, her white dress soaked in crimson, her bare feet leaving trails of blood that vanished into the dust. Her face was no longer blank, it was cracked like porcelain, faint veins of shadow pulsing beneath her skin. Her eyes glowed a deep, eerie red. What are you? Sienna demanded, her voice trembling but firm. The girl tilted her head, smiling faintly. I'm what's left of innocence when it's buried in too much pain. She took a slow step closer. Before Art became what he is, he was human. Broken. Forgotten. A man whose laughter was all he had left in a world that devoured him alive. Sienna's breathing quickened. You're lying. The girl shook her head. He was chosen long before he picked up the knife. I showed him the truth, the beauty in chaos, the purity in pain. He became my vessel, and I became his shadow. Her voice softened, almost tender. And you, Sienna, you're the light that was born from that same corruption. You think you're the savior, but you're just the other half of his curse. Sienna felt her stomach twist. No. I'm nothing like him. The girl smiled wider. Aren't you? You've killed. You've bled for this world. You've stared into his eyes and felt something you won't admit, fascination. Fear. The thrill of what you could become if you stopped resisting. Sienna stepped back, shaking her head violently. I fight to save, not destroy. The pale girl's laughter echoed, a sound like glass breaking underwater. You think saving and destroying are different? Everything burns in the end. You can't change that. You can only choose how bright it burns. The world around them began to shift. The ground beneath Sienna's feet cracked, revealing a chasm of molten light below. Shadows of the dead rose around her, faces she recognized. Victims. Her mother. Gabby. All whispering in unison. You opened the gate, Sienna. You brought the light here. Now it wants you back. The pale girl raised her hand, and suddenly. Images filled Sienna's mind, memories that weren't hers. A man in a hospital bed, pale and frail, smiling as he painted his face white for the first time. The laughter of doctors echoing down sterile halls. A scalpel gleaming. Screams. The sound of something breaking inside him that never healed again. Art the clown, before the clown. A broken soul reborn through suffering, guided by the same child now standing before her. You made him, Sienna whispered in horror. The pale girl's expression darkened. I only showed him what was already inside. Suddenly, the sky above them split open like torn flesh, and a wave of black mist poured down, swirling around them. From that mist, Art's laughter returned, deeper now, layered with 1,000 other voices. He's coming, the girl said softly. And when he does, you'll have to choose, become what you were born to be, or die trying to stop him. The ground convulsed violently. The pale girl's body began to dissolve into light, her voice echoing as her form broke apart. There's one truth left, Sienna. He's not your enemy. Sienna reached out, screaming over the roar of the collapsing world. Then who is? The girl's fading whisper lingered in the air, soft and haunting. The thing that made both of you. The ground gave way completely. Sienna fell again, her scream vanishing into the dark void below as laughter followed her, familiar, unending, and horribly joyful. Somewhere beneath the ashes, Art the clown opened his eyes. And the world began to bleed. The void swallowed Sienna whole. For what felt like eternity, she fell through blackness that breathed, through whispers that slithered into her ears like worms. Every echo, every pulse of the dark seemed alive, hungry. When she finally struck ground, it wasn't with a thud, it was like sinking into something soft and warm, as if the earth itself was made of flesh. She gasped, pulling herself upright. All around her stretched a barren wasteland, crimson skies, rivers of blood, mountains made of screaming faces. A storm of ash and fire churned above, and in the distance stood a structure that defied reason, a spire of bone and sinew that twisted into the heavens, pulsing with a heartbeat that shook the ground. At its peak burned a single, blood-red light. Sienna didn't need to ask. She knew what it was. The source. The throne. The heart of Art's power. Her dagger trembled in her hand, glowing faintly gold, but weaker now, fading. Her veins shimmered under her skin like dying embers. She could feel it, her strength draining the closer she came to that spire. And then she heard him. A soft, wet chuckle, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "Art," she whispered. From the crimson mist ahead, he emerged. Taller than before. His body reshaped into something monstrous, his once harmless clown suit now a tapestry of human skin, stitched together with black thread. His grin was wider, carved into his flesh like a permanent wound. His eyes, two pits of swirling black and red, glowed with inhuman glee. Behind him floated the little pale girl, no longer small or fragile. Her face had stretched into something skeletal, her hair floating like smoke, her voice layered with whispers that didn't belong to her. "It's time," she said, her tone disturbingly serene. "He's ready." Art tilted his head, his laughter growing louder, distorted, echoing through the air like a symphony of screams. The ground beneath him pulsed in rhythm with the sound. The spire of bone began to bleed, rivers of red streaming down its sides. Sienna could barely stand. "You can't win," she gasped. The pale girl smiled faintly. "He already has. This world, your world, it was never yours. It was born from him. You all are pieces of his joke." She gestured to the horizon. The land shifted, and Sienna saw it, a city forming in the distance, a nightmarish version of Miles County built from blood and bone. People screamed as they were dragged from the ground, their faces melted into the architecture, their bodies becoming part of this new creation. Art raised his hands toward the spire, his body convulsing. The sky cracked open, and from the wound in the heavens poured torrents of red light. Every beam struck him, tearing at his flesh, fusing him with the darkness. He wasn't becoming a man anymore. He was becoming a god. Sienna screamed, rushing forward, her dagger bursting into light once more. She swung at him, the blade striking his arm, flesh burned, black smoke hissing, but Art only laughed. The wound sealed instantly. His power was beyond comprehension. The pale girl's voice thundered across the wasteland. "He was born from the world's hatred, Sienna. Every scream, every fear, every ounce of cruelty fed him. He is not a man. He is the laughter of the damned." Sienna fell to her knees, clutching her dagger. "Then why am I here? Why am I like this?" The child's form flickered, her face momentarily showing pity. "Because he needed you. Every god of chaos needs a god of light to define it. You were made as his mirror. You are the joke's punchline." Sienna looked up at Art, her tears glowing gold. "Then I'll be the end of it." She drove the dagger into the ground. The light spread from it like wildfire, splitting the earth, forming golden cracks that reached toward the spire. The world trembled violently. The spire began to crumble, its blood turning to vapor. Art screamed, an unholy, shrill sound that tore the sky in half. His body convulsed, his painted grin melting into raw flesh. The pale girl shrieked, her form fracturing. "You can't stop him. He's eternal." Sienna's voice boomed through the storm. "Then I'll end eternity." The ground exploded in light. Gold and red collided, consuming everything in a storm of fire and screams. The world of blood began to collapse, folding in on itself, swallowing the dead and the damned. Through the chaos, Sienna saw him one last time, Art's face, half-burned, his grin still there even as his flesh turned to ash. His laughter echoed faintly, defiant to the very end. The pale girl's final whisper reached Sienna as the light engulfed them both. "He'll come back. He always does." Then the spire fell, and the world of blood died screaming. Sienna closed her eyes, praying she had finally done enough. But somewhere, beyond the burning sky, a faint giggle drifted through the void. Art's laughter, still alive. The world was ending. Sienna stood in the middle of an ocean of fire, the ruins of the underworld collapsing around her. Every scream, every burst of light and shadow twisted together in a cataclysm that devoured itself. The golden cracks she had created stretched to infinity, splitting the crimson skies apart. But even as everything burned, his laughter persisted, soft, distant, and cruel. Art the clown refused to die. She fell to her knees, trembling, blood trickling from her mouth. Her dagger, her only weapon, lay shattered beside her. Her glowing veins dimmed, fading like dying embers. The world began to collapse into a whirlpool of darkness, dragging everything toward the center, toward the spire's remains, now a crater of molten blood. And from that crater, he rose again. Not as flesh. Not as man. But as something far worse. His body had become a storm, a shifting mass of black mist and bone, his grin now the size of the sky itself. His laughter vibrated through the air, bending the very ground beneath her. The remains of the pale girl drifted beside him, her voice hollow and fractured, whispering endless nonsense. "You can't kill laughter, Sienna," she murmured. "It's the sound that never dies." Sienna's tears evaporated in the heat. She could barely move, but she forced herself to stand. The air around her shimmered with light, what remained of her power, fragile but alive. "Then I'll silence it," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Art's colossal grin stretched across the horizon. He extended a hand, massive, skeletal, dripping with blood, and the world obeyed him. Tornadoes of bones and screams erupted around her. From the ground, the faces of the dead emerged, their mouths wide, chanting his name. Art. 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 Sienna raised her arms, summoning what little power remained inside her. Golden light flared, pushing back the darkness for an instant. But it wasn't enough. Her body was breaking, her veins glowing too brightly, ready to burst. Then, she heard another voice. Faint. Familiar. "Gabby. Sienna, don't stop, he feeds on fear, you have to let go." Sienna froze, her mind flashing with memories, her mother's smile, her brother's laugh, her friends, the warmth of life before the nightmare began. She realized then what the pale girl meant, she was Art's reflection, his opposite. Where he thrived on pain, she existed for hope. And hope was not a weapon. It was sacrifice. Sienna looked up at the monster that had once been Art the clown. "You win by making us afraid," she said quietly. "By making us think you'll never stop. But what if we stop needing to fight you?" Art's grin faltered. "Just slightly." Sienna stepped forward, light gathering around her like a halo of fire. "You can't kill what was never born," she whispered, repeating the pale girl's words. "But you can starve it." The world trembled as she pressed her hands to her chest. Her light flared, brighter than the sun. It burned through the black fog, through the screams, through Art's monstrous laughter. His grin distorted, cracking like glass. His laughter turned into a howl of rage as the light tore through him, unraveling the darkness itself. Every soul he devoured was released, thousands of voices crying out as the blood world collapsed into white. Sienna fell to the ground, her body dissolving into golden dust. She smiled faintly as she looked at the sky, whispering, "It's over." The explosion of light swallowed everything. Silence. Miles County, 3 months later. The city was rebuilding. The nightmares had stopped. People began to forget, the carnival, the killings, the faces on the news. The town breathed again. In a quiet cemetery at the edge of town, a small gravestone stood beneath an old willow tree. The name carved into it read, Sienna Shaw. The light that ended the darkness. A single red balloon drifted across the sky above it, carried by the wind. It snagged on the branches and burst silently, releasing a puff of black ash. From the shadows between the trees, a faint giggle echoed. A child's voice whispered, almost playfully, "Told you, he always comes back." The camera would pan downward, if this were a film, to reveal a faint smear of white paint on the bark of the willow tree. A crude smile. Black eyes. A single word scrawled beneath it in dripping red. Ha! Then silence again, until the faintest echo of carnival music began to play, distorted, broken, and laughing. Art the clown was never gone. He was waiting. And somewhere deep below Miles County, in the ashes of the underworld, a new heart began to beat. Slow. Steady. Smiling. The end, or the beginning of something worse.